In Islam, you can marry up to 4 wives and you can have an unlimited number of concubines. I'm going to tell you about the dark side of polygamy in Islam. We're going to go through some of the points that Muslim scholars bring up to defend polygamy and say it's the best thing in the world. We're going to talk about how some of these co-wives have to lie and cover it up. We're going to talk about how this actually benefits men more than women. We're going to see what's the real reason why Islam allows polygamy and why Islam encourages polygamy. The real reason why Islam wants men to have multiple wives. We're going to look at Muhammad's ideal marriages, ideal in quotes. I'm going to share an excerpt from an interview I did with Debbie, a former Muslim convert who was married to a man for 7 years after he decided to get a second wife. So she shares her story and goes into great detail as to the challenges and the difficulties of being in such a situation. So stay with it, and it's going to be a blast. The first problem with polygamy in Islam is not that a man can have 2 wives or 3 wives or 4 wives. Whatever they want to do, whatever sort of partnership or, agreement they have is fine if it's open and honest and everyone knows about it. I personally don't have a problem with it. What I do have a problem with is a spiritual compulsion, spiritual abuse, as Debbie called it in the interview we did. Spiritual abuse means that the religion is used as a way to compel or to push individuals into a situation that they wouldn't like or they wouldn't want to be in. For example, telling women, oh, this Muhammad is the ideal man and he had multiple wives, so this is what you need to do and this is the way to do it. This can be a form of spiritual abuse. Many women don't want the husband to have a second wife. They don't want to have to share their partner. They don't want their partner sleeping with another woman, period. But they don't have a choice because of Islam. Why is it that if Islam is so good for women, so many Muslim women suffer under Islam? They suffer because of rules that allow men to have multiple wives. I've heard of many examples of Muslim women where the husband actually went and got a second wife without telling her. And yes, many Muslim scholars will say that there's no condition that she has to tell her. Many Muslim women have had this experience of the husband actually getting married again without telling them. And of course, it's quite devastating and painful, and it's horrible to just imagine that you thought this man loved you and things were going well, and then all of a sudden, he has a second wife. And you didn't know anything about this. You're totally unprepared. Maybe he gave you hints that you wanted to. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you told him no. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter because it's halal in Islam and you can do that. Under Christianity, you wouldn't be able to do this. You'd have to have one man, one woman, and he would have to divorce you before getting another wife. So is that ideal? I'd say in some situations, a woman is probably better off, sharing a husband rather than having him leave her and then get another wife. But I would say there's also just as many cases, if not more, where the woman will just leave the man anyways because she doesn't want to share him and she never consented to this in the first place. And the honesty was not there, the transparency was not there. Some Muslim scholars will say you can put a contract in the marriage that a woman can say that a man cannot get a second wife. It's such a silly thing that you have to do that, right? It should be the default that the man has to ask the wife, because he's already in a relationship with her, can I have a second wife? Is that okay with you? Will that affect our relationship? Are you okay with that? Not that she can put it, and if she doesn't, then he can do it. No. The default should be, well, you ask the person that you're in a relationship right now. Are you okay with this, right? And if not, then it's over. Islam puts a lot of power in men's hands, as you have noticed, and takes it away from women. What do women get? Other than the fact that she gets to keep him, if that's what she even wants, she now has to share her financial situation with another woman. So half of the money that he has will now be spent on the second wife and all of her kids. So she now gets only half of the resources. You can understand why, from an evolutionary perspective, this would be difficult to bear, because now you're taking the resources away from the family and giving it to another person's kids, right? So as a mom in a relationship, or even if you don't have kids, you can understand that this can be devastating. And even many Muslim men will use government benefits in non-Muslim countries to finance their second and third wives. For example, Debbie's ex-husband, he was taking child benefits from her children, her child benefits, and using that financially to fund his second marriage and to have more kids, right? So he had 2 wives, and he was using money from the first relationship to fund the second one, which is disgusting. That money is supposed to be for the family. It's given by the government to pay for the kids' expenses and stuff, but he was using this to fund his Islamic lavish lifestyle. This also puts a woman in a difficult situation of having to lie in many cases about having a co-wife, about the fact that her husband actually has two wives, that when he's not there, he's actually with another woman. And most families would not be okay with the daughters sharing a husband. They would not be okay with it, right? So they have to lie. Debbie, in her case, she wasn't able to tell her parents because she knew it would kill them that she had a man that was sleeping with another woman at the same time sleeping with her. She did whatever she could because that's what a good Muslim wife is supposed to do. But you can imagine this was not at all a happy setup. Heck, even Muhammad. Was Muhammad the role model of a happy, loving marriage? We're going to talk about Muhammad. In regards to the society as a whole, this also leaves less women available and leaves more men empty-handed. It can't be good for society that there's even more men who are single. It's a destabilizing factor in a society to have a lot of single men, right? So when you have some men who have multiple wives, you're going to have more men with no wives, and that's a bad thing, if you ask me. Maybe if Islam allowed Muslim women to have multiple husbands, then a man would understand just how emotionally difficult and challenging it is for your partner to sleep with someone else while you're still with them. It's extremely difficult and it's extremely painful because we've evolved this way to want to have a relationship, an exclusive relationship, because we don't want that partner, if you're a man, having kids with someone else and then you're raising someone else's kids. The amount of emotional, let's say, trauma a person has to go through when they are unexpectedly hit with a situation like this is quite difficult. And I think most Muslim men don't understand just how difficult it is. Even if it's more common in history for men to have multiple partners, they don't realize just how difficult and traumatic this can be for the woman. And if Islam allowed the opposite, a woman could have multiple husbands, then they would understand, like she's gone half the time. Where is she? What's she doing? Is she sleeping with him? Is he a better partner? I mean, you can imagine how this makes a woman feel. It makes her feel less valuable because, hell, he can just go and get another wife and get rid of her, right? I mean, she's basically disposable to some extent, right? So this is definitely not an ideal situation for a woman to be in. Muslim scholars will say, well, if it was the other way around, then you wouldn't know what the kid is because you have multiple men. Well, a lot of relationships have nothing to do with child rearing, right? I'm not having kids anymore. I have 5 kids now with my wife. If I was in another relationship, it would not be about child rearing. It would be about, companionship, intimacy, and other things. It wouldn't be about raising kids anymore. So for all of those people that are in relationships without kids, well, that's not even an issue, right? It doesn't matter who the father is because there is no father because either they can't have kids or they're not planning to have kids, right? So that's a totally different situation altogether. And now we can get to, why does Islam encourage and support polygamy? What's the reason why? Well, it should be obvious to anyone. It's because Islam wants more babies. It wants to grow the population. It wants to grow the ummah. And that's why Islam encourages men to have multiple wives so they can make more babies. So because if you have one woman with 2 husbands, she can only get pregnant once every 9 months. But if you have one man with 2 women or 3 or 4, well, that's 4 times as many babies and the population will grow faster and faster. And as we know, even today, the greatest growth in the population of Muslims comes from birth. If polygamy is such a good thing, then we should see that in Muhammad's relationships, because Muhammad was the ideal Muslim man, the ideal husband, supposedly, and he is the best of all men. But when you look at his marriage, it was full of problems and suffering and fighting and jealousy and conflict and backstabbing between wives. And, it was not ideal. And he boycotted all his wives for 1 month because they were upset. This was not at all an ideal situation. It was not a happy marriage for any of them. It was not at all ideal that Aisha had to walk around wondering if one day her husband's going to get yet another wife, yet another wife, yet another wife. Every time he looks at a woman and likes her, boom, she's married to him, right? She had to compete with the other wives for attention and time and love. Then, of course, later on in the relationship, Muhammad took away Sauda's night, one of his first wives, and gave it to Aisha because Allah allowed him to do that. So not only was she married to him, so she still got some sort of financial support, but she didn't get any more intimacy from him, any more time from him. I mean, heck, even if you didn't want to sleep with her, you could still spend some time with her once every 9 nights. Wasn't even that much, wasn't even that often. But that's how it rolls with prophets, right? And God men. They change the rules to suit them, even though you're supposed to be, according to Islam, you're supposed to be just and equal and fair with all your wives. But Muhammad wasn't. He even took away one of the wives' nights, so you can spend it with the wife he actually wanted to spend time with. So, I mean, that's the problem. Islam sees women as baby-making machines to further its goal of growing the armies and the nation of Islam. And that's why Islam allows polygamy. Not because it's good for women, it's good for men, you could say to some extent, right? And men, of course, use the excuse of, oh, I'm just doing it to follow the Prophet, the Sunnah. But it's not about Sunnah, it's about their own benefit, their own enjoyment, right? Some of the things I described are problems in particular relationships and not problems with Islam itself, so to speak. For example, when I mentioned that, some husbands will be unfair to their wives, Islam says it's supposed to be fair. But the problem is Islam creates a system that puts all the power in men's hands. Men can divorce a wife with a simple word, saying talaq, and then the waiting period. Men get to have all the power and all the say in the relationship. It's very one-sided. So the problem is Islam creates a system of injustice. Even though it says, yeah, you're not allowed to do that, but it allows it by enabling it. That's the problem. That's one of the big problems with Islam. And yes, I do agree that polygamy may be good in some relationships, but for the vast majority, it's probably something that's quite less than ideal, I would say. And again, very unfair to the woman. And I'm going to share now an interview I did with Debbie, who was married to a former leader in Hizb ut-Tahrir, an Islamist group. She was married to him for many years, 7 years before he announced he was going to have a second wife. And at the end of it, check out her channel. It's going to be linked in the description, so you can subscribe to a new channel. She's going to be uploading more videos in the future. I mean, I've heard of men who get second wives, but I haven't heard the stories from a woman's perspective. So what was that like? So after 7 years, so you were married for 7 years, and then he decided to get a second wife.
Yeah, he told me from the beginning, though, that he would want more than one wife. So I knew it was probably going to happen. And then when he met somebody on a matrimonial site that wants to be a second wife and all this stuff, and as it became a reality, I was just like, okay, well, I had 3 kids already, and I just stayed busy. I was devastated initially because we weren't having a bad marriage where we didn't get along, and that's why he was doing it. He was doing it to just be more pious and do more sunnahs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, right. So yeah, this is how you make yourself feel better. And then I'm buying all these books written by polygamist women and how they go through it, and just this is my struggle that's going to get me to heaven, and I would be reassuring other sisters that would come over and cry for me, and I would have to reassure them and tell them it'll be okay. It's just,
oh wow,
yeah, it was crazy. I lost a lot of friends and I gained the more extreme friends, and when this happened, I got to know how many people actually do polygamy, because people don't talk about it, but once you are in it, then you're like, holy cow, it's big. There's a lot of Muslims do this.
And I'm just gonna call out the elephant in the room. This is illegal. So how do they keep it legal?
Apparently, it's only illegal if you legally marry all of them, which is impossible. So it's like a loophole. So they're just I just got all these girlfriends.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So basically, the claiming, if ever asked, legally, these are my girlfriends.
Yeah, just a bunch of baby mamas.
But Islamically, they're actually wives because they've had.
Yes, they do the Islamic marriage, yeah.
With 2 witnesses, so it is actually a wife, but
right,
legally,
not legally,
sort of dishonesty to keep it legal, right?
Right.
And all of the second wife, third wife, all of them have no legal protection, right?
Right.
In your case, did you do the legal, you legally got married?
No,
as well?
No, we didn't legally get married either.
So
So
he didn't want to register the marriage.
no, we just left it.
I've heard of this, and why like can you explain how did he convince you to do that?
I didn't really care because I had met him and it was like spontaneous. It was almost like a way out. I'm like, well, we're not going to
Okay.
legally do it. We'll just do it Islamically. So it'll be, it was just, it didn't matter to me. Like it was just almost like a safety net for me.
So there's a safety net for you, but normally it ends up being a safety net for the woman, the marriage, right? In terms of like asset distribution and
Well, not
stuff like that.
necessarily, because if you're not legally married, you can keep things separate easier.
Okay.
So like bank accounts,
Especially if you're coming in with more money, right?
right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So did that affect at all that doesn't affect child support or anything like that?
No, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why did you lose friends? I didn't get that part.
The ones that thought it was ridiculous, like.
But it's not your fault, though.
Oh, but like I was,
You were
I was
supporting
okay.
it.
Yeah, because I was okay with it and didn't stop my husband from doing it. I like how a lot of people would come over and like think I can control him. Like, why are you letting him do that? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I wish I could make him do things that I want. Like, how do you do that? Yeah.
It's people are, oh my god. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Why did you let him leave Islam? It's like people asking my wife, why did you let him leave Islam? Like, what, he just owned me?
Like, that's right. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like, that's a whole different.
So you're saying that there's a lot more people having second and third wives that you realize, like how common is this?
It's quite common. I mean, the people just do it, and sometimes they live in the same house. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes just.
So in your case, how was it?
Lived in separate houses.
Okay. So how was he able to afford 2 houses, if I may ask? Like, how is that possible? I mean, that's not
well,
common, right?
he owned businesses and stuff, and then child tax when you're having lots of kids. You get child tax every
So he's
month,
using the child tax from your kids.
Oh yeah.
To fund his second marriage.
Oh, that's the risk. He doesn't care where it comes from. Risk is risk. I had this argument with him. He was like, it doesn't matter. Your sustenance comes from with whatever. Like,
Gee,
so there's like, yeah.
That's slimy. Oh man, that's supposed to be for the kids, not for to be going on escapades with other women, right?
Yeah.
So you said you knew her.
Yeah, I befriended her to try to make it smoother transition, and so the kids don't freak out. And so yeah, we became friends, and it was weird because we shared a husband, so if we had complaints, we could like talk about it together. So there's like weird things that you can help each other and stuff, but it was crazy, like, to try to live that life amongst and lie to people about it. And then like you'd get these men that want their wives to be okay with it too, so they would come over with their wives and try to make us like these we would know. I knew what was happening, like some strange couples coming over, and then the wife sits down in front of me and the sister wife, and she's like sitting there like terrified, like, because she's now being told how to become a polygamist basically. And it's like, I was so mad. Like, these women don't want to do this. Like, this is like one of the hardest things you could do. And so I would just tell them, like, look at the bright side. Like, you'll only see this guy half the time. Like, that's all I could say. Like, do your own thing. You can demand some stuff. It's like, if I'm okay with this, then I want this. Like, just take advantage somehow. I don't know. But yeah, there's like a lot of this.
So just not to confuse viewers, because some people are kind of saying surprised, this is still like minority within minority though. So like within like very religious I don't know if non-religious Muslims would do it, but like within
it's always the religious ones.
Yeah, so within this group of religious Muslims, you have a minority that are doing it. Like in me personally, I knew one guy who told me he wanted to get a second wife, and I knew the imam did it. But even in my circle, I didn't actually know anyone who did it, or at least they didn't tell me. And I was
Yeah.
like, I was in the circle, like I was one of them. So I wasn't like, they would have no reason to hide it from me, I would say.
Yeah.
But I think you're right that when you actually do it, then the people that are also doing it kind of will, it becomes a little mini like subculture
Yeah.
inside the culture, that these we're all together in this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Emotionally though, like I would say, if you look at history, there were a lot of polygamous marriages, but it doesn't make it any easier. And like
No.
from an evolutionary perspective, from a woman's perspective or a man's perspective, let's look both ways. From a man's perspective, you wouldn't want your woman to be with another man, because if she gets pregnant, then you're raising someone else's offspring. And not that that's a problem per se, but if that happened, evolutionarily, my genes would have been cut off. So that means if I didn't mind my raising other people's kids, I wouldn't have kids that would succeed evolutionarily, right?
Yeah.
Meaning the cuckold problem is, men have evolved to want exclusive access to the woman, because they don't want to raise someone else's kids. Because if they did, then they wouldn't exist, because my parents would have, their line would have ended. So that tendency gets passed on. From a woman's perspective, she wants her man to invest all of his resources, I'm saying historically, into the marriage, into the offspring, because if he goes and has other children with other women, then there's just that much less resources for the family, for your family, right? So it makes sense that a woman would not want her man to have another woman. It just makes perfect sense, right? Like, I'm just saying, like, from an evolutionary perspective. But emotionally, we're all hardwired to, like, it's a very difficult thing to accept, right?
Yeah. It is. I it was so hard. Like I bought this really good book from an Islamic bookstore, and it was like going through like how all the hadith that the wives of the prophets pertaining to polygamy, and like different things that they went through and their jealousies, and it just helped me get through. And I had to literally show him, like, look, like, this is hard for me emotionally, like you can't discount that. And because he's just like, it's allowed in Islam, so you should just be fine with it. It's like, I still have emotions. I would have to like go through all the emotions that I'm going through with the book to prove to him that it's like a real thing. Like, he was just like, so like everything, like, if it's okay with Islam, then it's okay with Islam.
Yeah, it's
So
easy for him to say that, being the one that's having the second wife. But I mean,
yeah.
like, men should, like, I don't have a problem with polygamy, but if a man should be allowed to do it, then a woman should be allowed to do it too. It's
Yeah.
only fair. Like, polyamory is a more equitable system. Now, I don't think polyamory is for probably 99% of people,
Yeah.
but like the Islamic system is completely one-sided.
Yeah.
The man can have multiple wives, woman cannot have multiple partners.
Yeah.
But like, a man in that situation should think about it and say, well, if I want her to be okay with that, would I be okay with that? Right? And you can't say, oh, just because it happened, it's more common, or just because in history it happened, that doesn't make it any easier to accept. And
Yeah.
so the same emotions that she is feeling, you should be able to empathize with that if she did the same thing, right? Like, at least have that empathy, right?
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
these women were coming to your house, trying, the husbands wanted to convince them that, oh, look, this is so good. Like, practically speaking, how was life with a second wife? She was in a different house, so you would see her husband half the time then?
Yeah, so she lived on the same street. We spent time together. We would cook together. We like were pregnant at the same time. I mean,
Wow,
it
that's
sounds insane,
weird.
right? But
Yeah.
like, I just dove in, or like, this is how it is Islamically, and just yeah, it was. There's like a TV show called Sister Wives that came out. We watched all of that to try to get inspiration on how to do this, like, as a polygamous family. So I mean, culturally, there's support for this kind of stuff, whether or not it's illegal, you know.
Yeah.
So I did my very best to make the best out of every situation I was put into. Again, like I believed in Islam, so I was again. This was my jihad in my life that I was going to, you know, go to heaven for. You know.
This was what you were saying about spiritual abuse. It enables
Yeah.
situations, less than ideal situations, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And what about your kids? How did they take it? Did they eventually accept this as well? How did they?
Yeah, they accepted it because I was very good about not, you know, I was just like, this is our family. This is like we have like a larger family. So they didn't know any different. Where it got difficult was teaching our children to lie to my parents.
Oh.
And then we would have to explain, like, look, they won't understand because they're too far. Like, you know, it's just like teaching little kids this difference, right? It was very hard on them to have to keep secrets because they would go spend nights, you know, at their grandparents' house and stuff. So it's not like they didn't have much relationship. They had a close relationship with my
That's good.
family.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I'm so thankful for. My parents did not disown me amongst all this. And I stress that to anybody who's worried about a family member joining Islam is don't cut them out. Try to keep them close so that if they need to get out, you're welcoming to that. That's my advice. Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
my parents didn't agree with it, but they stayed by my side and helped me. So
And eventually you left it.
yeah,
And so,
and they were there for me, even though I had been lying to them about polygamy.
yeah.
Boy, were they upset when I told them about the polygamy part. But yeah.
Thanks for watching. Do consider joining my Patreon. Thank you to everyone that's joined and who continues to support me. I appreciate every one of you. This is your friendly ex-Muslim signing out.